Okay, this section is going to start to try to pick this thing apart. We know the scale. Now we need to figure out a few different ways we can kind of, I guess what I would call exploit it. Okay, things that are kind of comfortable under your fingers and things of that. So, kind of how I started messing around with this years ago was I just looked at it in octaves. We'll use this closed position to where I'll take this octave from here to here and then from here to here. So, and that's one of them. And then the next octave. Okay, and that is example 1C. Okay, that's essentially just breaking the scale into separate octaves. What you can do to this is help you get the feel for the scale and to kind of get that otherworldly sound going on. Try to answer yourself back to help you memorize not only the fingering but the sound of the scale too. Okay, so I'm just kind of making a pattern up in one octave and repeating it in the next octave. It is patterns, but you'll see as we start breaking this out into chunks of notes within the scale as opposed to one note after the other and after the other, it gets to sound like a few different kinds of scales. I think it's pretty cool myself, the way the scale operates. But essentially for this one I'm just taking the scale in 2 octaves so I can just kind of spread out the visual aspect of it and make it a little bit easier to comprehend in smaller chunks, I guess. Okay, the next example 1D, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start expanding the scale to where I started on this note in our last example and ended on that note. I'm going to add in one note lower here and one note higher here. Okay, and this just kind of starts expanding that scale out the spectrum here, and it kind of gets you away from starting and ending on the root notes. That's primarily the idea here. Okay, so instead of playing from here to here and back down, now I'm playing from a D to a F, and I am resolving it back to E. So I have, let me just check the notation. Yep, it is. Okay, so again, I was able to break it into smaller groups, okay, by looking at it in octaves. But now I'm also trying to expand it and make the whole thing bigger as a whole. Alright, another thing, let me double check here. Example 1E deals with fingering, and we'll deal with this a little bit more in the next segment too. Is at first, when you're used to playing pentatonic scales and the diatonic modes, as they call them, or the diatonic scales, there's a lot of happy fingering going on. I mean, it's pretty comfortable stuff, you know. Just lays under your hands. That, you know, that's like a blues scale. Then you got the diatonics. Okay, so those are the basic scales a lot of people play and they practice and they make music out of. With this scale, the fingering, I mean, right off the bat, you can tell it's just a lot more awkward, and it's going to take a little practice to get it under your fingers. So what I did to kind of break this up and kind of bring it back into my world a little bit was look at this as 3 notes to a string. And one of the patterns I found here that kind of gives a basic idea is on the D and the G string. important about this is there's two things. The notes were, if we look at the lowest note on each string, it's starting with the first finger each time, but it's moving up a fret every time you go up a string and down a fret when you go down a string. And there's this other toggle that's going on of the first, second, fourth finger, up your half step on the next string, and then it's first, third, and fourth finger. Okay, so if you're used to playing like a natural minor, an A natural minor scale where you have a fingering like this, the fingering is exactly the same as one you're probably comfortable with, except it moves the string for the second one. Okay, and this is basically to get a little comfort back into it, but also start to look at some of the idiosyncrasies of the scale, which I'll show you coming up here. Okay?